Speaking freedom, giving you the answers to be free. Be free.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance is about to begin.
Welcome to Speaking Freedom TV's Journey to Freedom. I am your host, Dr. Casey, and today's special guest is Dr. Cassandra. Hey, girl.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so we also have another special guest. It's this here. I have to talk about it because I did an accidental big chop the other day, and it's really not as short as it seems. It's kind of long, but it's curly.
When you pull it out like that, yeah, it's
oh my gosh. So that's called shrinkage. But we are not here to talk about me or my hair. I just had to give it a little bit of attention because it's a new look based on the last show that I had. So, Cassandra, Dr. Cassandra, I apologize. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I guess professionally, I'm a motivational speaker and a communication studies professor. So I talk a lot about feelings and relationships and really how we have all these different experiences that impact how we relate to other people. So that's what I do in my job life. But then I'm also a mom. I have 2 kids, and I'm a person who likes to hang out and go paddleboarding and go outside and go hiking or just do a bunch of random stuff. So that's kind of a little bit about me, I guess.
So what made you decide you wanted to come and talk about your journey to freedom?
I was excited. Of course, I looked at all your stuff and everything before I, reached out. And I think the idea of just being able to have this platform and share, not only different pieces of your story, but the ways that you've overcome and the ways that different things have helped you along your journey. I think the more places that people can do that, like we can just keep creating this arsenal for other people to learn from. And I love that so much because you never know who's going to need to hear something from you or me or somebody else. And like, we can all say the same things, but we have a different take on it based on our own histories and everything.
Yeah, experience really matters. And a lot of people definitely need to talk to people with or hear from people with different life experience because really honestly for myself, I think I've grown the most from hearing stories from other people because it helps me to understand in a relational way how to apply those things to my life and then also move forward in a better, more efficient way. Because if you stumble, I don't have to stumble. I can learn from your stumbling block when possible. Now, of course, experience is one of the best teachers, but there are some things that we don't have to experience that somebody else already went through. So how did you get into your line of work?
Well, I say that I became a communication studies professor because I wanted to help other people use their voice because I didn't know how to use my own. And it's been, through my journey of teaching, it was really about that, about helping other people find spaces and ways to talk about their needs, ways to set boundaries, ways to like really own their identities. And it was something that I was good at teaching. I understand the concepts, but kind of why I dug into it and got so into it is because there was a lot of period of time in my own life where I really didn't understand what was happening to me, or I didn't get, my own reactions or how I was feeling. And so I kind of buried myself in academia of like learning, still couldn't really figure out how to do it for myself in a way that felt like authentic and real, but I was very good at helping other people do it. So I got into teaching and then really enjoyed all of that, but still kind of feel almost like an imposter because here I am so good at helping other people have relationships and teaching them how to communicate and own these pieces of their stories. And I felt like I was just like not really ever getting there for myself. So the motivational speaking part of things, I'd always done speeches, because of my job and things like that. But the motivational speaking part that I do now is a direct result of some things that happened that made me understand how to do this for myself. So the thing I want to share with everybody is, I said that it's about finding all these pieces and these things that have happened to you and learning to make them part of your story. And so I was sexually abused when I was a child, and I never talked about it. I never told anyone. I pretended it didn't matter. And I worked my whole life to, overcome and achieve and do all of these things to be awesome in spite of that. And it wasn't until a few years ago, my family was hit by a drunk driver, and physically we were fine, but emotionally that took me back to this place where all of a sudden, like, these memories and these feelings and these things that I'd worked so hard to mask and push aside my whole life, I couldn't anymore. My body was just done. And so in that time frame, I really had to go back and look at some of these things and look at the ways that they had impacted me, and look at how those were, those memories or those feelings and coping mechanisms. That was a lot of the reasons I was having problems or feeling shame or guilt or blame or all of these other things across my relationships. And I had no connection that it was because of some of these things from the abuse that I was harboring. So that's my very long-winded answer to your question about, how I got into this. And it's been really organic and natural as I've gone through different stages, and then really just understanding how to use my expertise and my education to really help other people see themselves a little bit.
So what about the accident was triggering?
It's a couple of things. The one thing I think was it put me back to a place where all of a sudden I was afraid, and I hadn't really been afraid. This car came out of nowhere, this drunk driver, and all of a sudden I was just terrified. And it was a fear that I knew before. It was like this, like, why am I so scared? And the thing that came out for me is my life kind of unraveled after that, with all the things. If your car's totaled, it's just a bunch of logistical stuff. Thankfully, we were okay physically. But anyway, it was something where my whole life got upside down again because of something somebody else did that I had no choice in. I was just I was driving down the road in my car, following the rules. And so I think that in part, it was like I was mad, and my body was like, no, you are not going to sit here and just not address this again, because you're still mad about things that have happened to you, and you're scared and you're angry. And so I just, I didn't open up to everybody even after that about what I was going through. So to a lot of people, I think in my social circle, I kind of just shut down. So it probably seemed like a disproportionate response, and that's why I really, one of the big things I encourage people to do is you never know where somebody else's breaking point is, right? Because you don't know all the things that stacked up until that point. So this one little thing that sets somebody off that seems like they're blowing something out of proportion or what have you, think it's really beneficial, instead of like, assuming that they're overreacting, to question maybe what's going on underneath the surface that led them to that.
Yeah, I think we have different coping mechanisms. Most of them are band-aids that are left on extremely too long. Although some coping mechanisms are good for functionality of life. Like, you're not going to keep putting yourself in things that trigger you. However, you shouldn't avoid triggers, because it is something that you need to address so that you can resolve whatever it is that are triggering you. So what would you say was the hardest part about facing yourself? Because when we are triggered, it forces us to face ourselves, and trauma really is, I think that's why it's so hard for people to have sat during the pandemic, because you have to sit with yourself. So the things that being busy would normally distract you from aren't there anymore. And you have to literally like sit with yourself. So that's why we saw a lot of people with drugs, alcohol, and even suicidal at times, because a lot of people can't sit with themselves. So what was the most difficult thing, and how did you adjust to that?
My most difficult thing has and still is shame. That's my go-to. The way that I torture myself, it's the way it comes up. It's a theme in everything. And so really for me, it was sitting with all of that. And it was the recognition too. I didn't realize I'd been in, fight or flight and all these nervous system states my whole life. And so, so much of my base level emotion was already way up here. So really recognizing why I felt that way inside, and understanding and really connecting the physical body to those emotional experiences, and then having to try to understand like the ways that I was showing up. And that was hard because too, I think, you know, anybody who's gone through, especially if you've had a lot of emotional reactivity or different healing things, or spaces where you just really haven't always understood yourself, or, you know, you felt bad for how you've acted or what have you. The hardest part of that for me was as a mom is, you know, just showing my kids and talking to them and wanting them to understand and bringing them through the process, but then also realizing all the ways that, you know, I hadn't shown up for them in the way that I wanted to, and, you know, or that I wish I could have, or what have you. So, you know, some guilt there, some sadness, some grief there, but then also, you know, just again, with the reframing of that, some really good pride there now, because the fact that we then could have the conversations and they can see me change the way I have, like that shift and their ability to witness that, you know, that's giving them some tools too. So I guess I want to encourage people to look at things that way too, because if you just look at the way that you act when you're healing or when you're in your trauma, oh my goodness, then you're going to have a whole nother level of shame to go through too. Right.
So how did that pain and trauma show up in your life prior to and even after the accident? Like, what did it look like on you for others?
I mean, I had a lot of coping mechanisms, like you said, that were served me at the time, but then just they became patterns that then I thought were part of my personality. I didn't realize that they were my coping mechanisms. So what I had to do when I was really trying to figure all these things out for myself, I did a lot of journaling. And then afterward, I went back and read my journals and I coded them and I found the themes. And so the themes kind of were my things I needed to work on, right? And so one of them was like, I was seeking external validation because I had no internal self-worth. So it's not like, oh, ever wanting achievements is bad, but I would rack up all these achievements or do all these things and then just on to the next one, like never celebrating, never understand, like, because it didn't matter. And I to the point where I literally do forget some of the things that I've done because it was just like, okay, yep, I'm going to get through this. Okay, yep, that's awesome. Because it was like, if I was feeling good about the things that I did externally, then that made me feel good. And I didn't need to look at anything else. And the thing is I didn't even know I was doing that. And that's what I also want to say. It's not like these coping mechanisms. Like I was like, oh, I don't want to look at my pain, so let me go do this.
Right.
I didn't realize I had pain because I was too busy numbing it out and distracting it, you know, like
I think over time if we've numbed it enough, because a lot of times I have a friend that she just has blacked out a whole long length of her childhood. And a lot of times we think that, like you said, that we're intentionally like, well, I'm not thinking about this. And a lot of times it really does become a form of our personality. And I say a form of it because it's who we are with the trauma on top, and peeling off the layers it can either range from peeling a banana and you have to go through the sides, and the lower you get, the more you have to peel, or an onion where, it's like, okay, it's not a long journey, but it's a thick journey. So you're peeling layer after layer after layer. And a lot of times people think that healing is like a one-time thing. And healing is such a lifestyle, because I just said this today, things happen every single day in our lives that we have to grow through. And some of them will trigger old things, and some of them will be an opportunity to form new coping mechanisms or establish new triggers, because now this is the reason why I'm acting like this. So, how has the changes transpired? Like, what are some of the most noticeable things about your characteristic and personality since your journey of healing?
I think that for me, what I notice is how I feel internally. And so that changes then how I can show up externally. And it wasn't even as though, like, I've had wonderful relationships still with my kids and with my friends. It wasn't like I was going around like, being, it was more how I felt. right? And so it's, or I would tell then other people how I felt, and it didn't necessarily match up with what everybody was seeing, right? So then you also are just feel more shame about, why can't I fix this?
Right.
So for me, it's that I finally feel for myself this peace that I thought was only possible for other people. And some of that has to do with my nervous system. Like I had to work really hard. I do every single day still to do different breathing exercises or things to calm my nervous system, because my baseline, and again, I didn't realize that. So I didn't realize how much control I had tied across different situations too. Like I would really want, have my schedule all planned out. And then if something would come into my schedule, I'd be like almost panicky feeling out of, and nobody, like my kids would be like, Mom, it's not that big of a deal. But my body would react
saying
there
something
because it was
different.
already right there. And so for me, having the ability to not feel that bodily sensation that would make me want to or make me feel anxious, because I just thought I had terrible anxiety my whole life, yet at the same time, not really understanding what that was from or why, or trying to medicate it or what have you. So, and then also I think the ability to really process why I do some of the things I do instead of shaming myself for them, working to have a frame of reference of understanding that is transformative, in terms of when I first started reading some of the trauma literature, because again, I'm a professor, but I had shied away. I don't need to read that. I'm going to focus over here. And reading some of it, it's almost like painful in the sense where it brings back, some different things, but at the same time, it also made me feel so seen. And I needed that. And that's why, again, like shows like yours or other places where people are sharing their stories, like you never know what is going to be like the version of something that is just going to make somebody else be like, oh yeah, that's it. That's what that feels like. And yeah.
So when it comes to your work environment as a professor, how does that work? As far as your interaction with students and your work, like your work life?
In terms of how like it's changed how I've changed in my work life.
Yes. How, is there a difference that you can see, like a before and after type, just with the interaction with your school and the students that you deal with?
It's interesting because I had always managed to do that for other people. So students who I've had, 20 years ago, we still had like a deep connection because I would know how to help them move through their stuff and communicate different. So we created those bonds. But the thing that everybody notices or that people recognize in me is then how I'm also then sharing the ways that I've moved through it differently. And then also I incorporate what I do now that I didn't used to do at all is I incorporate a lot of different modalities, so when I'm talking to people about their communication, I'm a trained communication researcher, but they don't teach you to talk about then all these other influences. Right. So I really, as part of my healing journey, when I was realizing all of these other things that I wanted help with, because again, I just rack up certificates. Apparently I decided to go, I'm going to go get trained in that. I'm going to learn how to do that, which is also a coping mechanism, You
sound like me almost.
Yeah. It's like, let me do that. Oh, there's a class for that. Okay. And so, but what that did is it really allowed.
You see?
Yeah. No, I was noticing, I was admiring all your certificates.
Yeah, it's anxiety.
But
it's restlessness.
And it makes me feel seen though. And then it gives me like a strength and a power to be like, okay, now I know how to understand this and approach this because I do want to help other people with that. So I think for me, like how the big change is, incorporating some of those things. When I lecture now, I absolutely am talking about your nervous system. I'm talking about some of these other ways of emotional expression that I didn't before. And I think that, from my perspective, that's so much more valuable because we all need a big old toolbox of multiple things that we can do to
and
help
when
ourselves.
It comes to communication, like it is the framework for everything. So when you talk about your nervous system, how you communicate will dictate or be dictated by the nervous system factors, whether you're feeling stressed, anxious, whether you are even having a spiritual influx, whether you are a believer in God or if you're having doubts, all of those things are really affect your communication. So what was your spiritual journey like throughout this process?
It was sorry, it was really, that makes me emotional because I feel like I connected in a way that I used to, but I had forgotten, in a lot of different ways, because I wasn't able to really ground down. I wasn't able to drop in. I wasn't able to really have like a sense of peace to meditate or pray or to do anything like really in connection with my spiritual self, because I couldn't turn off the voices, not, I couldn't turn off, some of these other rumination and some of these other things. So the beautiful thing for me now is I like to spend a lot of time in nature, and I didn't for the longest time. Again, I kind of even shut off that aspect of myself, which is interesting. And I just find myself really able to be grateful and to be thankful for so many different things. And that knowledge and that freedom and that feeling again, and just really being like grateful for the abundance that I've been blessed with, being able to be, go outside and look at the trees and be like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful that I get to be here right now. I know that sounds so simple and silly, but if you're watching, you see I'm about crying right now talking about it, because again, it was like a connection that I knew I wanted and was craving, but I couldn't get it. And I felt like dropping away some of those other things. And because what dropping all those coping mechanisms did is it allowed me to feel back to my authentic self. Like you're saying, it allowed me to peel back all those layers. And so then without those layers and those walls, I just have a much deeper spiritual connection, not only for myself, but in growing and talking with other people and helping them find that for themselves. And, what does this look like for you to connect with something, to really feel like there is something more for you? So yeah, it's been, and I didn't expect that. So it's been really cool.
I would like to add, for all of our listeners, that when you become a parent, that is already like a good boulder, but it's a boulder on top of whatever you're already carrying and whatever you're holding on to. And although some people don't want kids, children will literally show you who you are, and they will bring you to a place of working on yourself and working through things. Because even I have a boy and a girl, and my daughter, I see my attitude and some of the things in her. But then in my son, I see other things, and it is such a coming to self moment to watch your children, and then to be the person to help them in ways that either you were or weren't helped as a child. Because a lot of times, when we are abused, whether it's sexual abuse, verbal abuse, or any other physical abuse, or emotional abuse, it changes who we are as people. But then when we have children, we have the opportunity to teach them the very things that we wanted somebody to teach us, and to protect them the very way that you wanted to be protected. So a lot of times having children is a part of your healing journey, because now you're able to be the adult that you needed, be the person that you needed. Because it's not always about being the adult or the grown up. It's about finding and showing your vulnerability, that a way that children, I don't know what it is about children, but it just it makes you vulnerable. I mean, of course, the emotional aspect of being but
it's interesting how it can come up though too. So I just had an instance this week. So my youngest is 17, my son. So I have a daughter and a son as well. So he's, and we have a lot of differences, but like you said, I'll see myself in him sometimes, but we've kind of been butting heads lately over some things. And I could feel myself just like getting like, like, oh, why is he doing that? And I had to pause, and I was like, oh, he's acting like his dad, who is my ex-husband for a reason. Right.
Right.
So I was like, oh, this is bringing this up in me, and I'm responding to him like I did to his dad. And so even that, I'm like, okay, I gotta see this a little bit.
The same, but I think my daughter is a little bit more like my ex-husband than my son. But I definitely am like, oh, you acting like your daddy right now. So let me just bring it down a notch and get my thoughts together so I can respond to you instead of the him in you.
Yes,
That's
that.
difficult. That's difficult sometimes. But that is what children will do, because if you're willing, because everybody is not willing. Everybody doesn't take the time to spend with their children. A lot of people, and I am not trying to shame anybody.
Hi, I'm Dr. Casey. Not your typical clinical doctor. I am an ordained minister, but not your typical minister. I am also a certified life coach, love coach, sex coach, solution focus coach, transformation coach, and more. I have a whole lot of information that I would like to help you grow with. And I hope that soon I can help you be the best you that you can be. Confidence, spirituality, and purpose. That's wholeness, complete.
A lot of people go to work all day and only have 2-3 hours a day with their children. So they don't get to experience the fullness of parenting in a way that would be as impactful as those who are able to interact on a regular basis and a very functional parenting relationship with your children. And listen, having children it's not the end all be all, but it changes you so much to where after you have children, after you experience even divorce, you have to find yourself again. So there's a lot of things that having children will add a different layer of who you have to become, but it also breaks those layers down. And for me, divorce was a blessing in disguise. Of course, it was hard at first, because when I got married, who gets married thinking that they're going to get a divorce?
Right.
Probably 1%. The people that are going in for a reason, they are considering that divorce might happen. But for the most of us, we don't go in thinking that we're going to get divorced. So a lot of times divorce breaks us down in one way or another. And then we are left to put ourselves together. But the greatest thing about it is that we are able to put the pieces back the way we design and not the way other people would have us to do. And it frees us, and it really changes us in a sense of rediscovering yourself is powerful, because it's a lot of things that you will stop doing because either you have children or because you're now married. And then when you're no longer married, and I don't wish divorce on anybody, however, I would like to say that sometimes divorce is not a bad thing, because we sometimes marry people with good intentions without seeing the fullness of who they are. So when they actually show us who they really are versus the representative, and the representative is who the person thinks that they need to become to be the person that you want, which is really not a good thing, because it doesn't allow you to actually get to know who they are. So you fall in love with this character, and then the character, the acting portions of that person begins to wear off, and then you're left with the real personality of the individual, and that is not always what you sign up for. So and I'm saying this because I think that people put so much emphasis on staying married or being married for a long time. But if you're married for a long time and you're unhappy, that's not going to help you grow, heal, or raise your children properly. One of the things that I learned in psychology is that a happy single parent is better than a married miserable parent, because the kids really learn from every aspect of you. So if you raise them in dysfunction, then they will think the dysfunction is either normal or begin to despise the thought of relationships and communication because of what they saw.
Absolutely. No, I've taught family communication for years. And that's one of the things is like, we know that, and the statistics even show that, children actually, they do better when they're in a household where there's displays of love and affection. And if you are in a partnership where you are not showing displays of love and affection and what a happy relationship can be, that is very detrimental. So people who are staying together and their kids are not seeing that, they do notice those things. And then also too, like a lot of people will stay together for the kids and then wait till their kids leave to get divorced. And as a person who teaches college students, I have to tell you, they don't like that either.
Yeah,
Like,
it's probably worse.
it's harder. No, because then they get resentful because they're like, they feel like their whole childhood was fake, or that they were just, so again, it's like, we think we're making these choices, like you said, oh, for the kids, got to stay together for the kids or what have you. But kids are smart and they absorb their environment and they witness and see and learn. And so it's really, like you're saying, healing yourself, figuring out what the healthy relationships for you are. So those are the things your kids can witness. And if that means you're healthy as a single person, but you were not as a partnered person, then that's what your kids need to see. Yes. But we get, it's hard because there's still such a stigma for that. And I think then some of the things that we think we're doing to protect our kids, we don't realize the long-term repercussions.
Yeah. It's a lot of things that we think are protecting them, but it doesn't protect them because it the same way I just talked about a representative, it shows them a false reality of what to expect in life. And it's always better to, you don't want to tell your children everything, but definitely age appropriate things so that they are able to learn and grow and form good relationships and find understanding on what's friendship, what's real, what's fake, and what they should question. And listen, a lot of people talk about having childlike faith, but children question everything. So if you want to have childlike faith, you got to be able to be willing to question the things, even the things that you believe deeply in, because sometimes, those questions are there to help us grow, and it gives us a different level of understanding about whatever it is that we believe. And it gives you the backing to be able to allow that to be a foundation. It's a lot of times that if you're asked a question, you get defensive because you don't know, because you haven't researched enough to really understand what it is that you're supposed to know. And then somebody asks you and you're upset. So how has this helped you with your co-parenting?
That was a big assumption that there was co-parenting.
It was. I apologize. No, it could have made you a better communicator on your end, but that doesn't always mean that the other co-parent is going to be the same.
No, we
tolerable.
We're really, really good now, but we had our moments where we were not, and that was very challenging. And I think like what has made it easier is
the kids are older now.
Yeah, is that right? We don't have to talk because the kids don't need us to. That helps. No,
is a lifesaver.
What a turning point though was, honestly, is then when I was doing some of my healing stuff, is I just stopped reacting. I stopped going there, because we had all these cycles, even via text or what have you. And so I just quit. Whereas before I wouldn't, I'd get all agitated or angry or what have you. So I'm like, I got to clap back, or I got to say this, or how dare you, or whatever,
right.
And walking around with that, waiting to be offended by him kind of thing. And so, then I just kind of dropped that for myself and was like, it doesn't mean the things didn't still frustrate me or irritate me, but I just I wouldn't take it there. Yeah. And that at first, and I think too, it used to be, I would maybe think oh, well, why does he get to say this? Or why is he going to do that? But then I was really realizing that I can hold on to my peace if I don't jump into that.
Right.
And so it really did shift it, but it took lots of rounds before I got to that place. I just want to let people know, as you said, it's a journey.
the journey is tolling. But I think for myself, what helped to get better was the children get older, they're getting their own phones. So now I don't have to do the communication. So now I'm like, hey son, what's going on? Because I don't get the communication. And it is definitely a work in progress, but I am counting down to my empty nester years. And that has me excited.
Yeah, it's kind of that's the space I'm about to go into. My son's graduating here. But when this airs, he will have just graduated. And it's a cool feeling, like just what you were saying too, even, after finding yourself after the divorce, what I realized is I'm still was finding myself, but in relationship to my children, And so like now really thinking about like, oh, wow, I'm making decisions without considering somebody else at all. Like even simple decisions like, what do I want to eat if I'm not thinking about what other people don't like or what they're going to eat or whatever else, And so it's kind of fun. And just to think about like all these possibilities that, maybe I won't eat dinner at all. Like, because I'm not going to cook ever again. I don't know. Like I told my kids, I was like, I don't even want to plant. I want nothing to nurture. I just
listen. My son is going into high school, and I'm already in my empty nester prep.
Yes, I'm here for that.
I'm not waiting until the end, and it's so crazy because it's such a blessing because my son and my daughter are only like 16 months apart. So it's gonna be like one after the other. I'm already like, yeah, when she gets to high school, you'll be driving, so I don't have to do the transport anymore.
That does make such a huge difference. Mine were 2 years apart in school. And yeah, it's amazing that once one of them drives, how all of a sudden your world is just freed up so differently too. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. I admire your space right now.
Well, it's coming for you. And that's what's hard. I want everybody to know that too. Like I just said this to somebody today. It's like, I don't think we talk often enough about how you can be happy with your life and you can have chosen all the things that are surrounding you and you can still be overwhelmed by it. Yes. There can still be days where you're like, I am tired, or years, honestly, where you are tired. And I think like, that's not a complaint that you hate your life. That's not a complaint that there's something wrong. It's an acknowledgement that in our society, we push ourselves to all these boundaries on all these multiple roles. And if you're carrying that, especially raising children without a partner, it's a lot. I mean, not just emotional labor, but then not even having somebody to, talk to or get understanding, or somebody who really, is going to like be there for your kids in the way that you are. And I think like to really allowing yourself some grace in that and giving yourself some space any way that shape or form that you can. And knowing that, a lot of times too, as a single parent, you feel too guilty to do that. But back to showing your kids, they need to see you take time for yourself so that they take time for themselves. Because you don't want them growing up being all burnt out and stressed out and not having boundaries. So like we have to show them how to do that too,
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it is not a parenting book because every child is different, every experience is different, everybody's life is different, everybody's trauma is different, everybody's just everything is different. There are no two people who are the same. Even if you have two children, they can be twins. They can still experience life totally different. And as a whole, as women, but even for men, we really have to understand the differences in life and how we are all different, because we'll spend all of our life trying to mimic or be like or idolize people, and we don't know the inner workings of how they got there. Yeah. We don't know when we saying these people are goals, we don't know the ruckus behind the prettiness that we see. And it is very fundamental that we appreciate our own experiences and learn how to craft our lives the way that we want. And it does get overwhelming, like you said, at times, and you are tired, but we pray for God to put a lot on our plate when we need to pray to manage what is actually on our plate. Because if you keep praying for more stuff, then more stuff's gonna come. And if you don't do away with and shoo away, then your plate will be stacked up. It'll be like having a Thanksgiving plate. And instead of going and getting 2 plates, you just stacking more stuff on top of more stuff on top of more stuff, like the layer of the onion. So we, even in that, and even in transitioning from being married to having children, to possibly being divorced or growing old with somebody. There are still a lot of areas of healing that will happen within your growth, because I mean, we're always growing, especially if you're addressing things within. You're going to be growing regardless, even if you're not taking any more classes, because a lot of the classes that I took it because I wanted to understand me, but also to help other people to understand themselves, in knowing that if I've had these struggles, then somebody else is having these struggles or struggles similar, that I can impact them by showing them, hey, look, I went through this and it went okay. I mean, it was hard. It was some struggles. It was some things that I had to learn to overcome and cope with until I could make the situation better. But if we can do it, then you can do it. But your doing it will look different than somebody else is doing it. So please, if you're watching this, don't try to make your life be what somebody else's experience is, or what other people say that your life should be, because they're projecting based on their fears, based on their perceived limits, based on what people expected of them. And you have to figure out what is good for you. So,
Absolutely.
Dr. Cassandra, could you please give us some advice before we get out of here?
You're exactly right. I couldn't agree more in terms of just, it's not about having this big list of all these things that you have to do, but it's about finding these things that will work in your life. And so for me, I really have to look at a lot of different areas. And that's why I said I kind of have this toolbox of a lot of different things that work. And so the thing that I think is most helpful for people, like if you're struggling, is to really kind of identify the things that do make you feel better. Okay, so what are the ways that you can soothe yourself? And what are the ways, like, who are the people that you can reach out to if you need to co-regulate with somebody or you need some support? But then what are the spaces that you can try to do that for yourself? And for me too, really discovering what that was. And a big one, I know people get sick of hearing that they should journal, but you should journal.
It helps.
And it does. And for me too, I want to tell people, like, a lot of times when I would feel something that I wanted to write down, I wasn't actually like by my journal. So don't make it hard. I just had a phone. I have my phone. Everybody has their phone with them all the time. I have a note in my phone. Sometimes I do audio notes. Sometimes I'm just furiously typing something. But it allows like me to just do it in a free flowing form, whatever I feel like, when I feel like it, as opposed to feeling like, oh, I have to journal right now. And then, other things too, just really, incorporating and remembering to move your body and get out some of those anxious feelings and things like that. And remembering your breath and to slow things down. I mean, so many of those things that sound so simple and small are things that we just don't do because we're on autopilot. We're just going through the motions, or before we've even entered a conversation, we've already like practiced how it's going to go, or we've anticipated the other person's reaction. Your body feels that, so it's like, okay, calm it down a second and then show up as your authentic self, as opposed to this person who's got this like agenda or whatever.
Right.
So I think like those things, for me, again, it can feel like a lot of work on the one hand, because you're like, oh, I got to do this, or I should do that. So I had to kind of flip the script for myself and realize that like that work makes me feel so powerful then, because then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I did that, or I set that boundary, or I showed up, or I was sad, but now I feel better because I went for a walk instead of eating ice cream or whatever.
Right.
Or sometimes you got to eat the ice cream,
Right.
whatever.
Eat the ice cream and then walk. It's about prioritizing.
While you're walking, eat the ice cream.
Hey, that works too. It's about prioritizing what feels good. And some of that is figuring out what doesn't feel good, because listen, a lot of times you might not know exactly what you want, but you will get closer to what you need by understanding what you don't want, what doesn't work for you. Because if you keep doing the cycles of what don't work, you're never going to get to what does work, or what feels healthy, or what feels satisfying or fulfilling. So I do have another question for you. If there was anything in your life that you could change, would you change anything?
No, I really wouldn't. And That's a hard one for me to say. I was abused for 6 years. You would think that I would take that one away. And I'm kind of surprised by my own answer in that aspect. But the things that I was put on this earth to do and the things that I know I'm supposed to do to help people, I think I have a much different understanding of how I'm supposed to relate to other people and how I'm supposed to help other people because of everything that I've gone through.
Mhm.
And so, well, yeah, I wish some of my traumas hadn't happened for where I am now and what my purpose is. It's who I was supposed to be.
So, I've been having chills throughout this conversation, but and it's not cold in my house. but Lord, I just forget what I was about to say. Lord, it just left me. I mean, like, just was like, um, what I like to tell people is that there are a lot of things that we experience that, I mean, we didn't have to go through that in order to get to where we are, but definitely going through that helped us become who we were supposed to be. And I asked this question because when my father passed away, I think this is when I really started thinking about this back in 2017. And I was like, if I change just one little thing, if my mother would have been around more, I might be a different person. My personality might be different. The things that I would have learned could have been different. If my dad would have been around more, there's no telling how that would have affected me. However, knowing that I became this person, I don't like to be the strong Black woman or super independent, but
Mhm.
I have become very self-sufficient because of the things that I was able to overcome and the lessons that I learned from overcoming. And the biggest part was going through all of that, finding a place of healing, and then understanding how to use the attitude, the assertiveness, the all the things that people normally tell you aren't good, or you need to work on this, or why are you acting like that, but you learning to use them as not as necessities, but when I need them, more than just because like I'm just everywhere. And that is a very freeing thing, learning how to be when you need it versus just carrying it around. So what does freedom mean to you?
It goes back. I mean, I keep going back to the same thing, but it's freedom from, that shame and that guilt and that blame. It's freedom from the thoughts from the self-harming thoughts, and that's really the way I put it is like, we talk a lot about self-harm, and so many people are self-harming every single day with the way they talk to themselves. And that's what I was doing. So for me, it's freedom from my thoughts. And that doesn't mean that they still don't happen, but it means that I recognize them and I can, like, no, that's not what's going on here. Or, whatever, talk to my inner critic. And I think like that freedom for me, because I was in my head so much all the time with the rumination or the wondering what other people thought or their perceptions or how did I upset somebody or what did I do wrong. So that's the biggest space. And it's given me a lot more emotional energy then to do some of these other things that I know I'm supposed to do.
Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. I think we've covered some very much needed topics, especially when you talk about overcoming trauma, definitely overcoming the trauma of divorce and trying to raise children, because a lot of people struggle with these things and are ashamed to talk about it, or don't feel like they have the proper support, or they get negative support. And when I say negative support, it's just somebody that's always feeding on the negative side of things versus looking at the positive end of whether it's divorce, whether it's co-parenting, or just raising children, just life in general. A lot of people are Debbie Downers, pessimistic patties, and all of those negative Nancy's, versus finding the light within whatever the struggle is. And a lot of times, if we look for the light is the lesson. then we'll see the blessing in it all, because instead of that thing being traumatic, now it comes with, oh, this is a powerful experience because of what I've learned, whether it's learning to protect your children, whether it's learning how to set boundaries and teach boundaries to your children, or if it's just learning how to accept all of who you are, because the only way you can really become who you're supposed to be is by accepting all of you, the good, the bad, the indifferent. What people say that you should be ashamed of, learn to embrace it and then wear it with a badge of honor, because once you wear it with a badge of honor, nobody can use it against you. Nobody can hang it over your head and say, "Ooh, well, I know," or "Ooh, what about this?" Because guess what? I've accepted it. I'm okay with it, and life continues. Like, no matter what goes on, unless you're facing death, life continues. Now, before we go, I did want to address the self-harm comment that you made, because self-harm is not just being suicidal. It is not just physically cutting or depriving yourself of something. Self-harm can be the way you talk to yourself. It can definitely be the way you eat or don't eat. It could be working out too much. It could be going to church too much. It could be a lot of things that we use to drown out our truth. And it is so important, again, to accept and see your truth for what it is, so that you can heal and become the best version of who you're supposed to be. We are all here with a purpose. You have to use your experiences and your life to tap into why God sent you here. And then you can be great. And you will experience a life that you probably couldn't even imagine once you begin to accept those things and really walk into the light of your purpose. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any questions that you have for me before we go?
No, this was such a great conversation. Thank you again for having me. And I appreciate the way we just talked through so many different things. And I really, again, I hope everybody listening, the thing is nobody should feel alone, because, we're all going through different things and working to heal and doing the best that we can. And so if you ever feel like you're alone, I hope that somebody turns on your show and realizes that they're not.
So with that being said, I want to do my rendition of Michael Jackson. You are not alone. I'm here. Okay, let me not do that.
I was here for it.
Look, because I love that song. That's one of my favorite songs. Because literally, when we often feel like there's nobody else going through it, nobody else will understand, we are truly not alone in this battle of life, because it is a battle. It comes with ups and downs. It comes with all types of turns and twists and things you wouldn't expect. But guess what? We are here along with many others who have been there, experienced that, and have healed. So don't be discouraged. Healing is available, but it starts within yourself and deciding to take that healing journey. And that is the show for today. Thank you again, Dr. Cassandra, for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Casey, Dr. Casey. Welcome to Speaking Freedom. We are happy to have you, and we hope that we are able to help you in every way possible. Have a good evening. If you've enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. New episode every Friday.